The Tale of Melanie, a poetic retelling of the Portal 2 mod, Portal Stories Mel, set in the medieval AU established in the Trial of the Bow and the Heart of the Exile. Written by ElvenWhovian and Starry-nightengale. Read by ElvenWhovian. Forgotten years and windswept fears bring memory out at last. Yet many a story remains untold from aperture's dark past. Alongside archer, fool, and queen, a wealth of tales exist. Yet of those you've yet to hear, just one such tale is this. Of old when bow of trial was wrought, the chambers vast were made. The king desired knowledge great, and thus his plans were laid. King Cave summoned heroes true, the trial he did decree, and one such champion of all was fairest Melanie. She was skilled as any man in archery and might, a champion of distant lands, her will was sure and bright. The bow she bore with skill so great, she outran every peer. The days were fair and joyous then, and free of dread and fear. Soon Melanie had proved her strength, the learned men knew true. Thus they sought to test her will with potions they had brewed. "This," they said, "will make you sleep for an hour or less, my dear." Yet Melanie, it seemed, was given too much, and swooned beyond a year. They sought to wake her, but in vain. The draught had done its work, and the learned men of aperture made note of this potion's quirk. They laid her bed deep in the ground, on the labyrinth's lowest floor, and waited for her at last to wake, to take up the trial once more. Time went on. The king, he died. The queen now reigned in dread. Still after the flame had brought her low, fair Melanie lay in bed. Yet not long after such a time she suddenly woke from dream, and her dreary sleeping mind no time had passed, it seemed. A gardener was young Virgil. Though short and quick of speech, the spell of the queen had been on him ere since her first defeat. Yet Virgil in twilight of the mind still wandered the gardens fair, till one day he fell into a hole that long ages had put there. Past the chambers and the caves, where the earliest trials were run, and when he struck the ground thus hard, the enchantment was undone. Alas, thus trapped beneath debris, he cried aloud for help, and Melanie heard from her bed the urgent, fearful yelp. She thought at first it was the king, come to lead her to his court, but when she found poor Virgil, she was surprised at his report. "You've slept for 50 years," he said. "They never thought you'd stir, though perhaps 'twas fortunate in the end you escaped the spell of her." Indeed, the curse of the darkened queen blocked all from any door, but Melanie remained untouched, for she'd come long before. Thus Virgil offered her a deal, his conditions left no doubt. "Free me from this trap," he said, "and I'll lead you up and out." So Melanie freed the poor fellow, and soon he was set aright, and the two climbed up and out of there towards the ever-gathering light. Yet as they climbed, Virgil looked down and saw water on the rise. "Alas," he said, "here comes a flood. What could have caused this tide?" Now Virgil was learned in every part of the castle's rhythm and rhyme, and he knew of the reservoir below, and how its level was timed. "Someone must have caused this. See, the lever is far above. One person of ill intent is controlling this great flood." The water rose, and thus they fled. Their fortunes brightened then, for Melanie came upon the bow, laid to rest by the queen's men. So she took up the wondrous tool and used it to their aid. Yet the flood still rose after their feet, despite the plans they made. They turned a corner, and then they saw, to great shock and dismay, there was a host of Ellet warriors who purposefully blocked their way. "You cannot pass," the Ellet said. "Thus did our master bid. You must pay for crimes you've done. Indeed, neither of you shall live." "What "What have we done?" Melanie cried. Yet soon she saw the truth. The Ellet, too, were under some spell, their minds immune to proof. Virgil then took Melanie's hand, he pulled her to the side, and out into the garden, in hopes that they could hide. A maze there was of plants and hedges, specially made by he, and thus they lost the Ellet host, in the midst of the greenery. Once they reached the other side and stood on the overlook, they saw the Ellet, lost indeed, in the greenery overtook. "You won't escape without our help," Virgil called from their high place. "But give us aid and spare our lives, and perhaps we'll show you grace." Whether it was the maze's confusion, or light from the incoming sun, at once the Ellet's minds were clear, the spell on them undone. Virgil led them out of there, they begged forgiveness true, and told him and fair Melanie of the task they'd been sent to do. "Indeed we had been enslaved," said the leader of the throng. "A dragon lives above these halls. He turned our minds thus wrong. He said you'd killed the learned men who used to walk this hall, and that we should run before the flood and slay any and all." Virgil wondered at this news, for the dragon he knew well. This was Aegis, a pet of the king, stronger than any could tell. In olden days he had thus kept their foes at bay, but when the queen took up the crown, she bid him sleep away. Aegis was mistaken in his blame of the servant's demise, and thus it seemed he sought to kill all those left inside. The others left in twilight shade, who walked in somber mind. The dragon did not sense at all, for his wit was dulled by time. So it was that when Virgil fell, and Melanie woke from slumber, the dragon was stirred within his lair, their lives he would dash asunder. He came upon a few Ellet, in vain they tried to flee, they all succumbed to his dark will, and he set them to his deed. Thus ended the Ellet's tale, and Melanie proposed a task. "Help us cast Aegis into sleep, and we'll all be free at last." The Ellet accepted, and they were off, to the formidable dragon's den, but Virgil shook with fear for all, especially for his friend. "Dearest Melanie," he said, "if we're about to face our doom, I must thank you now for aiding me, when I was trapped within that room. If not for you, I would have surely perished before long. I believe this too can be overcome. Together we'll be strong." Fair Melanie returned his thanks for leading her out of the dark. The two had courage and went on, with the Ellet, who thus did hark. They passed through a storehouse of the king, stocked with magic vials, and found a potion there to make the dragon sleep a while. The Ellet each took up a vial, better multiple tries than few, and they entered the dragon's darkened lair, where Aegis roared and fumed. The beast surrounded from all sides, fair Melanie took care. Upon her signal the Ellet cast all their potions into the air. It settled upon the dragon, his bulk a scaly heap, and before they had time to catch a breath, he fell, giving way to sleep. They worked together to throw back the lever, and stopped the coming flood. The feat was so immense indeed, only a dragon could undo what they'd done. Yet as he slowly closed his eyes, did they hear Aegis murmur low, "The queen will live again some day. You should have let me go. I drew the flood to destroy her form, which lays on the throne-room floor. And now my task is unfinished. Indeed, she will wake once more." With that the dragon fell asleep, not to wake for 10 year, and the Ellet, Virgil, and Melanie all shed a bitter tear. "Alas," moaned Virgil to his peers, "have we truly done what we should? If he'd been allowed to complete his task, the queen would be gone for good." "But so would all her cursed captives," Melanie wisely pointed out. "Now one may rise to defeat her again. Of this I have no doubt." With that she gave the bow to the Ellet, deciding they'd know best, and they bore it far within the halls. On a pedestal it did rest. As the Ellette bid farewell to them and vanished into the hall, Virgil spotted a secret door in the dragon lair's far wall. "This will lead you out," he said. "I'm not sure what you will find, but you should remain unharmed, my friend, with no spell upon your mind. As for me, I must stay, for I was under her spell, but you are free to go where you will. Dear Melanie, farewell." Thus Melanie stepped through into a land torn up by war. She went forth into the setting sun, and of her we know no more. As for Virgil, none know true whatever became of him. Some say he escaped, some say he died, or his mind again grew dim. One thing is sure, though, in this tale, and should not be left behind, that Aegus gave one last command, for slumber took his mind. Before his defeat by potion's will, he whispered to a servant true, and thus the oracle crept the halls where wandered a knight of blue. She unlocked the door to a certain room, where sleeping archer did rest, and thus the fool awoke the flame to finish Aegus's quest.